do today, especially. Morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Y'all come in and grab a seat. So good to be with you this morning. Hope that your week has gone great, and so glad that you made an effort to be in Bible class this morning. I know it's been a little weird lately. We have these gaps to where we'll jump into something and then we'll have a missionary come, and that's going to continue for a little while, especially through Harvest Sunday. But I'm thankful for that, and I hope you are as well. Carl was here and, man, did an outstanding job, and I loved listening to his work and what he does. And so I'm so thankful to give him the opportunity to teach and to preach, and I'll always be willing to do that, and I hope you are understanding of that, and I hope it doesn't mess up our rhythm and our flow as we study this. So what I want to do today is kind of just give you a refresher course of what we studied 2 weeks ago, because there's times where I read and I listen to podcasts and I study and I prep, and I've been listening to these things and reading these things for years, and then I vomit it all out onto you, and then I go home and Amanda's like, "Whoa, that was a lot, boo." It's like, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forget." Like, sometimes as teachers we forget that you're not reading the same things I'm reading, or you're not studying the same things that I'm studying, or maybe you're studying something different than I've been studying. So we're not always on the same page, so it's hard for me to just vomit things out on you. That's a horrible choice of words, but you get the picture here. And then expect you to just track along with me. And so, 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about Genesis 1, the flow of Genesis 1, the literary structure of Genesis 1, and it was a lot. Now, let me say this. It's meant to be a lot. Okay, I know it was a lot, but it's meant to be a lot. Maybe you sat through that class and you went home and thought, "Whew, I'm tired," or "Whoa, I don't know how to wrap my mind around everything that was said in class this morning." Good, good, because when you approach the Bible, a lot of times we come to this book and our posture is, "I've got it all figured out." You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times we come to this book and our posture is, "I don't really need to study it because I've been studying it my whole life and I pretty much know everything that it has to teach." And then maybe you sat through a class like that and it's like, "Oh, I don't know where I'm at." And it's like a wave just hits you. And so for me, my experience as a minister and my experience as a Bible teacher has been that continually. It's just wave after wave. And I would encourage you as a student of the Bible, remember, I'm trying to help teach you how to study the Bible and maybe give you some new methods of that. A lot of you are already great Bible students, but I would encourage you to just wade out into those waves. Let those waves hit you one after the other until finally you learn to surf, or swim, whatever you want to say. Let the Bible humble you sometimes. And let, some of the things we talk about in here confuse you at times and wrestle with those things. And I'm going to give you some things today that maybe you can wrestle with in your small group tonight. Especially in the sermon, I sent out some discussion questions that you can use or throw away to your group leaders, and hopefully, you'll wrestle with those. So this morning, I want to briefly and quickly walk through what we talked about last time, but I also want to highlight a few of those points. And then next week, we may have a missionary coming next week. I can never remember my calendar. Amanda reminds me of my calendar every morning. I say, "Amanda, what do I have going on today?" Next week. Yes, that's right. And so we'll be skipping another week, which is completely fine. We'll take this in small doses and let it simmer a little bit. So let's jump into this, and I want to give you the opportunity to ask questions and make comments and all of that. And so as we saw, in the beginning, you have God, the statement God, and then you have this word, this Hebrew word bara, and it means creator. So you have a creator, and then you have who hovering over the darkness, the Spirit, okay? So you have this character who's God. You also have the Spirit, and then how does God put the Spirit into motion? He speaks. Word, and so you have Spirit, Creator, Word. And then you have this 7-day structure. And we talked about the bizarreness of this 7-day structure. You have light, darkness, water, sky, land, and seas. And then in this, let me go forward here a little bit. And so then you have these corresponding days here. Day 4 corresponds to day 1. Day 5 corresponds to day 2, and day 6 to day 3. And so what you see this Creator doing through His Spirit and through the spoken word is this Creator is separating light from darkness, separating water from water, separating land from seas, letting the waters recede. And then in this narrative, you see the Creator filling each of those spaces that were separated. And then on day 7, He does what? He rests. That's right. And so you see these refrains as well, and we talked a lot about these. These refrains of it was evening and it was morning. It was evening and it was morning. At the end of every day, it was evening and it was morning. And this other refrain that's repetitive in this poem is, it was good. And God saw that it was good. God looked at what He had made, and it was good. And then He creates man, and he gets to the last, you get to the end of the poem, and it was all very good. And so it's this motion, it's this rhythm, it's this ancient poem that we have of creating and resting, creating and resting. And so we talked about this, and this was probably the most confusing thing. I know that when I initially heard this and studied this and kind of looked into this, this was a little confusing to me. But also one of the most fascinating things to me is that the Bible oftentimes is made up of chiasms. And so we talked about Eastern thought versus Western thought and the differences between those two. And so how's an Easterner thinking when they read through literature like this? Well, they're looking for a treasure. They're looking for a picture. They are seeing a picture being painted by the author. And a lot of times you have these chiasms. And chiasms have bookends. So you'll notice, there's sort of a beginning point to a story, and there's an ending point to a story. And typically, you can find the treasure hidden within that chiasm. Where? Anybody? In the middle. That's right. And so it always draws you to the middle. And you're trying to find what the middle is, or what the treasure is, or what everything sort of circulates around in that narrative, in that story. Do you remember what we said the treasure was in Genesis chapter 1? Anybody? Sabbath. Thank you. I was like, please, somebody. One person remembered because it was so important. You see this Hebrew word, and it means seasons, or it can be translated Sabbath. And so all of this, the creation narrative, is pointing towards Sabbath. Now, like I said last time, we read this literature, and oftentimes we ask the wrong questions of the literature. And let me clarify here, because I didn't want you to get the wrong impression last time. I don't want you to get the wrong impression this time. I'm not saying that creation didn't happen in 7 literal days. Could it have happened in 7 literal days? Sure. Is that the question you should be asking of the text? Absolutely not. That's not the question the text is trying to answer. And I hope you see that as we walk through this literary structure, as we walk through this literature, and you see this Eastern mindset, these ancient authors drawing these people in and pointing them to the truth or the treasure of what God really wants them to find. And that is that God rested. This is a Sabbath text. This is a celebration text. Now, do you remember who would have been the original audience to read Genesis? It's specifically Genesis chapter 1. We talked about this. Anybody remember? That was like 10 answers at once, but I heard the Israelites in there, okay? And where would they have first heard it? They wouldn't have read it themselves, but heard it read to them. They're wandering, right. And they're coming out of where? Egypt. And they've been doing what for so long? Making bricks. That's right, Sharon. They're making bricks. So their value comes from how much they can make. Their value comes from what they can produce. And if they don't produce, they're absolutely worthless. And if they don't produce, they'll probably be killed. Their family will probably be killed. And so their entire, they still have their roots in their God. They still have roots in their Hebrew culture. But after that long, those things start to get wiped away. You start to forget who you are. You have generation after generation that's been caught up in slavery. Egypt is all you know. Brick making is all you know. It's the family business. It's what everybody does. It is 24/7 for you. Do you get a vacation as a brick maker slave? No. You don't pause. You don't stop. You don't get a Sabbath. And so when God speaks and when God creates, God wants to give his people an image of who he is and the beauty and the treasure of who we are. And so what's cool about the chiasm in Genesis 1, like I said last time, it's not the most simple chiasm. It's both of these wrapped up into one. It's one of the more complex chiasms that you find in the Bible, so it's not the greatest one to start on, but it's where the Bible starts, so it's the one we're starting on. So the creation of man is sort of like a thumb sticking out on this chiasm, like it doesn't belong there. It's like a protrusion. It's just kind of odd. And it's this weird, kind of moment of like it doesn't fit in there, but that actually makes it fit perfectly because God is trying to show these people their true value and how he operates. And so the treasure is Sabbath. So I want to jump out of Genesis here a minute and highlight this point because since this is the treasure of this chiasm, I want to show you more scripture about how God rests and how God wants you to rest and how God wants you to see your value just simply because he says you're good, simply because he says you're very good. And so the image, if you remember, the image that we have of day 7 in Genesis 1 was the refrain, there was evening and there was morning after day 7? No. So day 7, it's as if it continues forever. Day 7 it's as if we exist in day 7. And then you get this narrative of God giving mankind, man and woman, these works to do. Go and keep creating good. Keep doing all that you've seen me do. You're my Selim. You're created in my image. Be what I've created you to be and work in this flow. 6 and 1, 6 and 1. You rest. It's as if you rest in him. You find your value in him. So before we move on, we're going to be in the book of Job, Job chapter 38. Any questions or comments or thoughts on any of this that we've just reviewed? And if you're still trying to process it, that's great. I'm still trying to process it. But if you have any questions or things you want to toss out to the audience, I would love to hear them because communal conversation definitely helps in studying stuff like this. Yeah. Sorry about that, Barbara. Yeah. So ABCD, it's just a diagram to kind of show you how a chiasm play out. So day 1, 2, 3 would be like A, B, C. So then you would have, D, C, B, day 4, 5, 6. So that chiasm would be the first one. So you'd have A, B, C, D, C, B because they overlap like that and they mirror like that. So this is kind of showing the mirror of what a chiasm is. So, and then sometimes they'll reflect, directly reflect. So it'll be A, B, C, and then the chiasm will reflect A, B, C. So A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, D, C, B, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. Is that confusing? Yes, it should be. Christy?
Could you give us an example of another one?
Yes.
It's like patterns in poetry, isn't it? We're talking about
Right.
if they rhyme at the end and the A, and then like the next verse doesn't rhyme, and then it'll rhyme again. That's like the A-B poem.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about here, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're looking at poetry. This is poetry, and it's basically mirroring each. It's as if you're standing in a mirror. Yes, there's definitely a cadence to it. It's just a reflection, is what it is. So it's a reflection in the text, and it either reflects like you're looking in a mirror. It's the opposite. So your right side would be over here, correct? Unless your mirror is broken? No? Right here. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. But then sometimes it flips. And so your right arm would be over here. Yes, that's right. Amanda.
Well, so in college I took a wisdom literature class, so it was the first time I'd ever heard of the word chiasm.
Mm-hmm.
It was just interesting because it was so new to me. That we went through found like tons and tons of them throughout wisdom literature and poetry and the Bible and things, but also it was common outside of it. It's just Hebrew poetry. It's not just in the Bible, and so.
Right.
I think for us, we're like, okay, what is this, but for them, it was just a very common thing. And again, it was a way to find that treasure and look for how is this set up and what is, I don't know, I just remember learning that like this was just such a much more normal thing for them. And so
Yes.
it wasn't like, wait, is this what's happening here?
Right.
It was just the way that they communicated with poetry.
I would say that also helps them just process what that central message is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's repeated, it's a central message. If it reflects, it's a central message.
Right. Right, and we talked about the repetition of numbers throughout this poem. Of course, you're going to see a repetition of 7. That one's apparent. You see a repetition of 10 over and over. You see a repetition of 3. You see all of these different repetitions, and they would have picked up on it immediately, while we struggle because we got to walk over to this window and look through this window, and we're not used to looking through that window. Chrissy, you asked about other chiasms. Really, and I wish we had time, and eventually maybe we'll go through this. All of Genesis 1 through 11 is a chiasm. So you have chiasms within chiasms. And this is how they wrote. This is how they process and laid things out. Amanda?
Well, in Hebrew, it would be obvious because that's probably an obvious thing, but
Yeah.
it's not obvious to us to read. It doesn't, in English, it doesn't translate that way.
No. Yes.
We wouldn't recognize, we wouldn't read Genesis 1 through 11 and go, oh, that's a chiasm, because it's
Absolutely not. No. And I'm not saying it should be obvious to you. It obviously, I need to quit saying obvious, I think. Yeah. Jay?
I was going to say, like for us, for poetry, rhyming is a big deal.
Yeah.
But when you translate that to other languages, rhyming makes no sense.
Right. Yeah.
But in Hebrewism, parallelism is huge.
Yeah.
And that actually translates. So we can actually see this because of the structure.
Yeah. Yes. And parallelism is a good word to use because that's also a big part of these chiasms is, yeah, you're putting them side by side and you're seeing them side by side and you're trying to find what they rotate around. These are good. This is why I don't want to rush because I need to know where you're at. Okay, Job 38. I want to show you some really cool stuff. I've talked about this briefly in various devotionals. I talked a little bit about it at Camp Create. I keep wanting to say Create Camp. Camp Create. Yeah, it's a chiasm. Yeah. By the way, Chad's been texting me after the Eastern versus Western lesson, and Like we'll text something and Chad will be like, oh, but my Eastern mindset thinks this. I'm like, oh, Chad, yeah. Good stuff. All right, Job 38. So Job's gone through a bit of a rough patch, you might say, in his life. And his friends have showed up to mourn with him. And they begin to sort of lecture him, as we do. We want to lecture our friends and set them straight and let them know what they should have done and talk about why these things have happened to him. And then in chapter 38, sort of a fifth voice shows up. And this fifth voice is portrayed as the voice of God, the voice of Yahweh. And so the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm, and he said, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Verse 3. Number 3. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. That'll give you chills down your back, won't it? So God is going to question Job, at which point Job is probably thinking, is there another option? I would like to take option B. Listen to what God says, so remember, you get a picture, a beautiful picture of the character of this Creator in Genesis 1. Here this Creator is speaking again in a very blunt, fatherly, disciplinary way, but also a very, let me remind you, Job, of who I am and what you exist in. Beautiful language here. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy, who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds in garment and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no farther, here is where your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? Now understand, this is metaphorical. Please don't read this literally, just like Genesis 1. You're getting an image of who God is and how God relates to creation. I love verse 16. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Doesn't that just sound like awesome heavy metal lyrics? Have you seen just be the sweet heavy metal song. Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born. Ha ha, like insert LOL there. You have lived so many years. This is God being sarcastic in a sense. Isn't that fascinating? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm? To water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert. To satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass. Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? So from whose womb comes the ice, right? God has a womb. And then he says, who gives birth to the frost from the heavens? And so in verse 28, God uses masculine imagery to describe his work. And then in verse 29, God uses feminine imagery to describe his work. It's fascinating. Verse 30, when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen and school is canceled. I added that in. And then he moves on to talking about the animal kingdom. Chapter 39, look at this. and being an outdoorsman. This is one of my favorite, just really cool. Nobody loves the outdoors as much as outdoorsmen and women. I'd argue that with you all day long, because you sit out there and you put these scriptures on your mind and you think about them, and you're just amazed by it. But just listen to how Yahweh talks about his creation, specifically the animal kingdom here. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? So it's this idea of, Job, do you watch when these animals give birth? And Job, his answer is obviously no, but Yahweh's is, I do. I'm there. I'm actually involved in that. Who let the wild donkey go free? Verse 5. Who untied its ropes? Do you know who let the wild donkey go free? Same guy that let the dogs out. No, dumb joke there, yes. Sorry. That's a dad joke and a half. Isn't it? Amanda's going to get me for that one. And then in verse 13, I've shared these before. This is just pure gold. The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and feathers of the stork. She lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly as if they were not hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain, for God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a share of good sense. He says she is dumb. Yet when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider. She's not afraid. She's kind of carefree, wild, reckless in a sense. Essentially, God says the stork is one dumb animal. That is an animal that I did not give a dose of wisdom to, but when she flies, you should watch her, Job. She's fascinating. She is something to behold. You see, I want you to notice there's a profound lack of pragmatism towards, God's posture towards creation. It's like, this is what it is. Some of it doesn't even make sense. This animal just lays her eggs. She acts like they're not even her own. They could just get crushed. She treats her young harsh, which I've seen some of you parents do that. You act like they're not even your own, And it's sometimes they're just not even it doesn't even make sense. But God is just so what? What are some words you would use to describe God's attitude towards creation? Involved. Yes. What else? He adores it. He looks at it and it's like, oh, that is so good. What else?
A little defensive.
What's that?
Not defensive about it to Job, and then kind of you don't know what I had to do.
Right. He's protective of it. He cherishes it. It's, Job, who do you think you are? Pull your bootstraps up and I'm going to question you like a man, What else? Splendor. Vast imagination. Just the Creator just wonderful in the things that he created, and the beauty and the weirdness and the different aspects of it. What else?
He's all-knowing.
All-knowing, right. Everywhere, in all places, all-knowing. He holds the key to the hell and the ice and the lightning, and he's there when the bear bears her cub. That was a weird statement. There when the doe gives birth to the fawn. What else? What does this language do for you? Do you see? You don't read this and you don't sit down with it as a scientific text and try and figure out oh, so that's where ice comes from. God's got it in a storehouse up there. It's like a big igloo cooler, You would be so wrong and you would miss the point completely. Paul.
So at the beginning of this, Job is pleading his case. And he says, I want a defense attorney.
Yeah.
The end of 37, he says that, and then God shows up. It's pretty interesting to note that why to shut Job down, who was blameless,
Right.
who was innocent. Why does he? So it almost feels like God is manipulating Job or making him real, like pound him, like really put his thumb on him. I don't think that's God's intent, and I don't know if Job understood that later. He probably did.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
But the idea for me is God is beyond just creating. I know that sounds really strange, but if you notice the language that is used in there, he's beyond creating. The wisdom of God is so far. So to me, God is beyond. God is so powerful, he can create.
Right.
But he's also within the deep recesses of the instinct of animals, or the instinct of the oceans, or the instinct of creation.
Yes.
He is right in the little nooks and crannies of all of creation. And so to me, that's God being majestic. I mean, I don't even have a word.
Right.
There's not a word to describe. I mean, we could list all the good words and positive things about God, but it's just so beyond. I mean, it's just beyond.
Right. It's other.
It's other. That's
Other.
right. And for him to be able to create and move in such a way like that.
Yeah. This is humbling text. It's humbling text for sure. Jerry? Sorry. Jerry and then Cheryl. Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Bill Bryson has this line in one of his books, and he says, in the beginning, God created the Newtonian physics laws. And so and I think you see that in here. God didn't just invent the universe, he invented the laws that the universe follows.
Right.
And so it transcends our understanding. And that's the reason Job couldn't answer all these questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because he didn't understand the things that control
Right.
what makes ice and how an ostrich lays her egg.
Right. I love that. Cheryl?
I was just going to say, the very fact that God communicates to Job in this way, he's also communicating to the three that have been speaking to Job.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, it's almost as though God is showing a special care or love of Job, educating him. I love you, and I love all of the creation. So,
I was like, I love you too, Cheryl. Thanks for sharing that. But then I understood the context of what you were saying. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
but anyway, when you said something about a fatherly voice, I thought it was read as mostly sarcastic, but he honestly is.
Yeah, it's a let me show you a minute. These storehouses and lightning and snow and the wild donkey. Like, who let the wild donkey out? By the way, I was watching a National Geographic one time, and we have just done a study through Job at church, and we were watching this documentary or National Geographic or something, and they were talking about wild donkeys roaming the deserts, and they're like, we've only recently discovered wild donkeys within the last century. I'm like, no, we haven't. Like, Job knew about them long before that, Amanda.
When I read this is one of some of my favorite chapters in the Bible because they're so freeing to me. Because I'm kind of like Paul. Like, there's not a word that I can think of to describe God's posture toward his, or not just one word. It's all these things. But for me, it gives me so much freedom because I go, okay, there's no way that I can know everything, so I don't have to. So I can find joy in learning and understanding, trying to understand God better. But it's not this burden and
Right.
like striving. It's just this peace that I feel about no matter how much I can learn or know or the knowledge that I can gain, God is still so far beyond what I could ever imagine. There's just so much freedom in that. And that's when I think about Sabbath. I think about rest and resting in God.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's this posture of, Job, look at it. It's good. I'm going to stand back and just, it's day 7. Let's celebrate it. Like, let's rest, Job. Like this very humbling moment of, Job, you can't possibly understand who I am or what I've done or where I'm at. Like, just be in it. Like, this is not a posture. Your value doesn't come from what you've done. All your friends have told you this. This is why this is happening to you. Your posture doesn't. Your value doesn't come from production. Job, sit back. Let me tell you about where you live. Jay.
I was going to say, one of the beautiful things about this to me is you see the care that he has for creation and its maintenance and its sustenance. But if you read into the other ancient Near Eastern texts, whether it's Egyptian or Mesopotamian or whatever, their gods toy with creation.
Yeah.
They play with creation.
That's right.
They dominate. They have authority. You don't have this beautiful picture of a God who cares, which I think is the whole purpose of it.
Yahweh's different. He's not like other gods, for sure. Sharon.
There's so many times, when you say such and such that he created this, and you envision, he created the birds and the fish, and you just think, whoosh, there's the birds and the fish.
Right.
But I have a friend that she has a thing about birds, and she's forever posting on Facebook these weird, colorful birds. And I have thought, how many times when God, he did these one by one.
Right.
And when you think he created this bird that's all this, wow, look at that. That is so cool. Wonder what would happen if I changed it to this color. And I envision God in a whole different way when you think about all the little bitty things he did. Fish, look at the weirdness of the undersea thing.
Yeah.
They were all done individually. He didn't just go whoosh and there they were.
Right. All the birds of paradise, all those different. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Talk about the giraffe for a minute. Seriously?
Write your own Job text, Paul, about the giraffe. Yeah. I would love to see that one, actually.
I think one of the things here is somebody said over here that God is involved. He's not away. And even in Job's situation, even him saying, I want my defense attorney, God's like, dude, really?
Yeah.
Come on,
Right.
Don't cheapen who I am based on the circumstance that you've been through. I mean, there's got to be a bit of us that surrenders to the sovereignty of God. But
Yeah.
I don't think God he's not browbeating Job into, hey, I'm sovereign, you don't get to talk to me, you don't get to address me.
Right.
Like Jay saying, other gods that were believed were around at the time. But, it's pretty interesting to know how God really is moving Job in this direction of saying, hey, this is the real me, and I want to be a part of this.
I love it. Yeah. Cheryl.
Remembering that at the first of Job, God praises Job. He says he's not going to deny me. Satan has accused Job of following God only because he has so much, and God has blessed him so much. So we know what God thinks of Job, how he
Right. Yeah.
is Job, and then he's just helping Job to see Job.
Yes.
Don't speak where you don't really know.
Right. I love that. I want to look at one more before we run out of time here. But all of this to help you to understand that God loves creation. And God goes on and on endlessly about these creatures, and he goes into great detail surrounding the makeup of these animals and the laws and the storehouses and the lightning and thunder. All of this about, snow and hell and storms. And it's like, what? It's like, exactly. I just wanted to share it with you. Will you stand back and enjoy it? Will you live in the beauty that I've created you in? Like, God's primary posture towards earth is not production, but pleasure. It's not consumption, it's celebration. What would it look like if we, as a people of God, operated this way in God's good world? If we slowed down and understood, like, we don't earn our value by the number in our bank account. We don't earn our value by the title that we have at work. We don't earn our value by the number of letters behind our name. Our true and essential value comes from Yahweh, who says, slow down, you're good. And stand back and recognize, I got this. Like, you're in good hands. Way better than Allstate. Like, really good hands here. So Proverbs chapter 8. We got 1 minute. Proverbs chapter 8. I just want to read through this briefly. In Proverbs chapter 8, we kind of have the voice of wisdom speaking to us here. It's kind of the context of how this should be read. It says, to you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. Verse 6, listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true, for my lips detest wickedness. Jump down to verse 12. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance. And so then wisdom begins to speak, and she speaks of creation. Verse 22, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago at the very beginning when the world came to be. When there were no watery depths, I was given birth. When there were no springs overflowing with water. Before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundaries so that the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. Does that give you chills? Like, wisdom here is personified in a person, and the personification is of a God who loves this world, and the word we get is rejoices, delights, like day after day after day. This posture of God towards all creation, including humans. Humans are the pinnacle of that creation in the Genesis narrative, is one who rejoices not just in you, but in all creation. God's posture is first and foremost of pleasure, not production. It is of celebration, not consumption. And God calls us to celebrate with him. God calls us to, yes, there's work to do. Yes, there's more good and more organizing and more things to produce. But you make sure you pause and recognize and celebrate, and don't find your value in consumption and in production. You find your value in me. We're done. Thanks for your great comments today. Love you all.